Good morning, everybody. It's a Saturday morning and it's 9 o'clock, and 9 o'clock is always with me, Father Warner. I'm back from Goa. I was there for about 11 days. We had quite a lot of work to be done at our home for the Love, Joy, Hope Foundation, for the children's home. We are refitting the backyard in order to make it more bright, to plug the leaks that we had in the structure, but it's shaping out really well, and maybe I might have to go again just for a day or two to get things fixed. Today we celebrate the feast of St John Britto, and our text from the Gospel, if you look at the readings of today, are taken from the 12th chapter of the Gospel of John, verses 20 to 32. But I'd like to spend some time talking to you about St John Britto, especially because he is one of the saints celebrated, not an Indian saint, but a saint celebrated in India. So John Britto renamed himself, and that's what we know. He renamed himself Arul Anandar, and he's often referred to, if you read several texts on the internet, you will see that he is referred to as the Portuguese version of Saint Francis Xavier. Now, St John Britto was born in Portugal, in Portuguese aristocracy. He was born on the 1st of March in the year 1647, and at a very young age we know that he became a member of the royal court. He was about 9 years old. He was also at that point of time the companion to the young prince who later on became the King of Portugal, King Peter II. St. John Britto's father, his name was Salvador de Brito Pereira, died while serving as Viceroy of the Portuguese colony of Brazil. At that time, Brazil, as you know, was a Portuguese colony. Brazil is the only Latin American country that speaks Portuguese because they were colonized by the Portuguese. So when John de Brito was young, he almost also died of an illness, and it is at this point of time that his mother made a vow, and the vow was a rather interesting vow, that this young boy would wear a Jesuit cassock for a year if he was spared his life. I'd love to see young mothers or mothers today say the same. I'll make my children dress up as a priest or a nun and walk around for a year. But that was her faith, and she expressed it in simple ways. We know that St. John Britto regained his health, and he walked around the court literally at that point of time dressed like a miniature Jesuit, keeping his mother's vow. De Brito truly desired in his heart to become a Jesuit. We don't know whether this act triggered it off, but he desired, and despite all the pressure from the prince, who later on became the king, he entered the Jesuit novitiate in Lisbon. He joined in 1662 on the 17th of December, when St. John Britto was just 15 years old. And at that point of time, he went to study the very famous University of Coimbra. Now, St. John de Brito then wrote to his superiors in 1668. He asked that he be sent as a missionary to the East. Now, when St. John's mother heard that her son was going to India, she used all her influence to prevent him leaving Portugal. And she went to the papal nuncio to not merely intervene, but to interfere, literally. Now, John Britto's response went something like this. He said, "Not to answer the vocation as I ought would be to provoke the justice of God. As long as I live," he said, "I shall never cease striving to gain a passage to India." And that was his reply. Now, St. John de Brito was ordained finally in February of 1673, and he left Lisbon. He came to Goa he left in Feb, he reached mid-March, he left in Feb for Goa in about mid-March, and he reached several months later. That was a long journey. He arrived only in September. When he arrived, he was just this Father Di Britto, and he worked first in the mission field of Madurai. When he studied the Indian caste system, he discovered that most Christians belonged to the lowest and at that time to the most despised caste. He thought that members of the higher caste would also have to be converted for Christianity to really have a future in India. And so he became an Indian ascetic, a Pandara Swami, since these Pandara Swamis were permitted to approach individuals of all castes and establish a relationship with them. He also then went on to establish a small retreat in the wilderness. Now, St John Britto was one of the earliest Jesuit missionaries in India to adopt elements of the local culture in his mission to evangelize the people of India. You know, the Madurai mission was a very bold attempt to establish an Indian Catholic church. As such, St. John Britto learned the native language, went about dressed in yellow cotton. He lived like a sannyasi. He abstained from every kind of animal food and from wine. St. John Britto tried to teach the Catholic faith in categories and concepts that would make sense to the people that he was teaching the faith to. This method, proposed and practiced by Robert de Nobly, met with remarkable success. Now, as he became well known, the number of conversions also greatly increased. St. John Britto was made superior in Madurai after 11 years in the mission, but he also became, as one would always safely expect, he became the object of hostility from the upper class, the Brahmins, who resented his work, and then that plot was hatched to kill him. Now, he and some catechists were captured by soldiers in 1686. We are told that he was bound with heavy chains. When the soldiers threatened to kill the Jesuit, he did something interesting. He simply offered his neck. Kill me, he said. But they did not act. St. John Britto continued to remain in prison for about a month. And then the this Jesuit captive was released. Now, when he got back to Madurai, he was appointed to return to Portugal and to report the status of the mission in India. When he reached Lisbon, it took him 10 months to reach there, he was received like a hero. He toured the universities and colleges, and he described the adventurous life of an Indian missionary. His boyhood friend, if you remember, now had become the King of Portugal, King Peter II, and he asked John Britto to remain at home to tutor his two sons, but de Britto literally placed the needs in India above the comfort of the Portuguese court. De Britto sailed again to Goa and returned to the mission in Madurai. He arrived in November of 1690, and this time he arrived with 24 new missionaries. Now, he came back to Madurai despite a death threat that the Raja of Marava had made 4 years earlier. St. John Britto travelled at night. He travelled from station to station, mission station to mission station, so he could celebrate Mass, he could baptize converts. His success in converting even the prince Tadaya Theva was the reason why, indirectly, a reason why he would finally die. You see, the prince was interested in Christianity, and de Britto insisted that the prince could keep only one of his several wives after his baptism. And the prince agreed to, St. John Britto agreed to baptize him. The prince agreed to this condition, but one of those rejected wives complained to her uncle, who happened also to be the Raja of Marawa, and he sent soldiers to arrest St John Britto on January the 20th, 1690. 20 days later, the Raja exiled de Britto to Uriur, which was a neighboring province which was governed by his brother. The Raja instructed his brother to execute John the Britto, and he died in Uriur in Tamil Nadu on the 11th of Feb 1693. It was much later, in 1947, the year that India got its independence, that Pope Pius XII canonized John the Britto. I hope you enjoyed listening to the life of this saint who ministered and worked in the mission fields of India, and he did it so beautifully, taking into consideration the Indian language, the Indian culture, and going to people through a process of inculturation. I want to wish today my cousin Gail, who celebrates her birthday, and also my cousin Miriam's son Ethan, also a very happy birthday, and also to those who celebrate their wedding anniversary, in particular to Atul and Chanchal, and to Zion and Shivangi. A happy anniversary, and to all of you. I'll see you tomorrow again at 9 o'clock. Tomorrow's Sunday, but I'll do a teaching tomorrow based on the Sunday's Gospel of St. Matthew. Bye everybody, and don't forget to log in tomorrow at 9 o'clock. For today, please like this video, leave your comments, share this video with others, and let's inspire each other to become missionaries online.